The afternoon sun hung low and merciless over the Texas frontier, painting the scrubland in shades of copper and blood. Jack Morrison sat atop his weathered fence post, surveying the 30 acres that represented his entire life, a humble ranch that barely kept him fed, let alone prosperous. At 42, with weathered skin and calloused hands, he carried the weight of every hard year in the set of his jaw. Behind him, his small adobe house stood sentinel against the unforgiving landscape. A water well, the most precious resource in this godforsaken territory, stood near the barn like a symbol of his meager fortune. The distant sound of hoofbeats made him tense. Out here, visitors rarely brought good news. Sarah came running from the house, her red hair catching the dying light like fire. She was 28, half his age, but she'd married him anyway, a decision that still mystified him. She wore her concern openly on her beautiful face. "Jack, riders are coming. A lot of them." He turned to look at her, then back toward the horizon. Dust clouds rose thick and ominous, a visible warning of trouble. "Get inside," he said quietly, standing and brushing dust from his worn trousers. "Bolt the door." "Jack, those are—" "I know what they are." The approaching riders were Apache, warriors from the Mescalero tribe that had raided this territory for generations. Jack's own father had died defending settlers from these very people 30 years ago. The blood feud between the tribe and the frontier ranchers ran deeper than any river, darker than any night. Sarah gripped his arm. "You'll be killed. We should ride to town, get the militia." "There's no time." He placed a calloused hand on her cheek, feeling the warmth of her skin, the softness that belonged in a better world than this. "And they know where we are anyway. Running only brings faster death." She wanted to argue, but they both knew he was right. She retreated reluctantly into the house, and he heard the heavy wooden bolt slide home. The riders appeared like ghosts materializing from the dust itself. 12 Apache warriors, their bodies painted with the marks of war, feathers adorning their hair, weapons gleaming in the fading sunlight. Their horses were magnificent and terrible. At their head rode a man Jack recognized, Morning Cloud, a war leader whose reputation preceded him like a dark prophecy. Jack stayed where he stood, hands visible at his sides. One wrong move, one gesture that could be mistaken for reaching for a weapon, and he would die hard. Morning Cloud raised his hand, and the warriors halted, stirring dust that hung heavy in the windless air. The Apache leader's eyes, dark and penetrating, fixed on Jack with the intensity of a hawk studying prey. "You are Jack Morrison," Morning Cloud said, his English precise and educated. "The son of James Morrison." It wasn't a question. Jack nodded slowly. "Your father killed my brother 29 winters ago. Shot him from horseback at the river crossing." Morning Cloud's jaw tightened. "My people have waited a long time for this. The debt will be paid today." Jack heard the truth in those words. This was the end. He'd lived longer than many men on the frontier, and perhaps that was grace enough. His thoughts turned to Sarah. Would they treat her decently? Would she survive this day? "I understand," Jack said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "But first, I ask you to accept my hospitality. My water well runs cold and deep. In the spirit of warriors, of men who understand hardship, I ask that you and your men drink before you do what you came to do." The warriors exchanged looks of confusion and suspicion. Hospitality was a concept they understood, but not from a doomed man offering it to those who came for his blood. Morning Cloud's expression hardened. "You mock us." "No," Jack replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I dishonor my father's memory by refusing you nothing I can offer. He was a hard man, a killing man. But he taught me this: a man who cannot show mercy is no man at all. He's just a beast." The words hung in the still air between them. Jack could see the calculation happening behind Morning Cloud's eyes, the internal struggle. "It could be poison," one of the younger warriors spat. "Then we die," Jack said simply. "But I don't believe you came for ambush and treachery. You came seeking justice, warrior to warrior. A man worthy of that cause doesn't need tricks." Something flickered across Morning Cloud's face, something Jack couldn't quite read. The Apache leader slowly dismounted and walked toward the well, his warriors tense as coiled snakes behind him. Jack moved to the well and drew water with the hand crank, filling a gourd. He drank first, long and deep, then handed it to Morning Cloud. The warrior hesitated only a moment before accepting. He drank, and his eyes closed briefly, as though receiving communion. When he finished, he handed the gourd to the warrior beside him, and one by one, all 12 men drank deeply of Jack's well. Sarah watched from the window, her hand over her mouth in an agony of confusion and fear. When they finished, Morning Cloud approached Jack directly. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his chest bare and marked with scars that told stories of 1,000 battles. "Your father killed my brother in rage," he said slowly. "They found him at dawn, his weapon still in his hand, his eyes burning with the anger that white men carry like disease." He paused, his dark eyes searching Jack's face. "You are not like him." "No," Jack agreed quietly. "I've tried not to be." Morning Cloud turned and looked back at his warriors, then at the barren landscape stretching endlessly around them. He turned back to Jack. "My people are dying of thirst 3 days' ride from here. The government sends us to land with no water, no mercy. We came to you for blood because we were taught blood is the only language you whites understand." He took a breath. "But you have shown us something different today." He extended his hand, and Jack took it. The grip was firm, warrior to warrior. "The debt is paid," Morning Cloud declared. "Your father's death for my brother's death, it is finished. No more blood between our peoples." He turned to his warriors and spoke in Apache, his voice carrying authority and finality. The young warrior who had questioned the water looked ready to protest, but Morning Cloud's glare silenced him. As Jack watched, the warrior pulled out a water bladder from his pack and offered it to Jack. "Fill this," he said. "You will give water to any of my people who come to you, sick or dying. You will tell them Morning Cloud sent you, and they will know that peace is possible." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of what he'd just been given, not just his life, but a responsibility that could extend far beyond these hills. The warriors rode out as the sun finally touched the horizon, turning the sky into a canvas of violet and gold. Jack stood motionless, watching the dust clouds fade back into the desert from which they came. Sarah emerged from the house, trembling, and fell into his arms. He held her, feeling the reality of survival, of a second chance at life that he'd had no right to expect. "How?" she whispered against his chest. "How did you know?" "I didn't," he admitted. "I just knew that hate only begets more hate. My father taught me to kill. Morning Cloud taught me today that it was the wrong lesson." He tilted her chin up and looked into her eyes. "I was tired of hate, Sarah. I didn't want to die hating. And I didn't want our children to be born into that legacy." Over the next 3 years, Jack's ranch became something unexpected, a place of refuge. Apache came seeking water and found it freely given. White settlers came seeking confrontation and found instead a rancher who could speak with Morning Cloud and broker peace. When Jack and Sarah's first child was born, a son they named James, not for Jack's father but for new beginnings, it was Morning Cloud himself who appeared at the ranch. The great warrior chief held the infant with surprising gentleness and whispered blessings in Apache. "Your son will know a world of less blood," he said to Jack. "You have given that gift." By the time 15 years had passed, the conflict that had raged for decades had transformed. Treaties were signed, understanding grew where once there had been only fury, and Jack Morrison's ranch became a symbol of what was possible when a man chose mercy over vengeance. On summer evenings, sitting on the porch with Sarah beside him, watching their children play in the golden light, Jack understood at last what his father had never known, that true strength isn't measured in blood spilled or enemies defeated, but in the courage required to see humanity in those we were taught to fear. The desert still blew hot and harsh, the frontier still demanded its price in sweat and sacrifice, but something had changed in the red earth around Jack's little ranch. Peace had taken root there, fragile as spring flowers, but real. And it had all begun with a single glass of water offered by a poor man to those sworn to be his enemies. A moment when one human being chose compassion over centuries of conditioning, and in doing so, rewrote the future for 2 peoples locked in endless war.